Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Amy Carnevale. Amy Carnevale was born on April 13th of this year in Beverly, Massachusetts, USA. Her father was a science teacher at a local school, and her mother worked as an investment consultant. Amy had a brother, Christopher, who was born 4 years earlier. Their family was very close-knit, supporting each other during difficult times. However, a few years after Amy's birth, tensions began to rise in the family. Eventually, her parents decided to divorce. At the time, Amy was just 6 years old, and the news was a huge shock for her. She struggled with her feelings for a while but eventually came to accept the situation. When she started school, it marked a new hopeful chapter in her life. Throughout this period, her family maintained their connection with her, which helped ease the emotional effects of her parents' separation. Amy was a beautiful and intelligent girl who became popular at school. She joined the cheerleading team and played field hockey. Friendly and sociable. Despite her busy social life, she had a deep love for nature and enjoyed spending time outdoors. Amy often combined her passion for nature with sports by playing golf with her father. Although she lived with her mother, she had a strong and positive relationship with her father. Amy dreams of becoming a hairstylist or hairdresser because she enjoys making her friends look beautiful. At this point in her life, she is preparing to enter high school, and she is a member of the school's cheerleading squad. She recently met a boy named Jamie Fuller at a friend's party. Amy was 12 years old, and Jamie was 14 at the time. It was well known that Jamie was a difficult person and often disrupted the peace at school. While he wasn't aggressive or malicious, some of his jokes crossed the line. Amy's parents disapproved of the relationship, thinking he was not good enough for her. When they first met, he was a skinny guy. But later he decided to get fit and build muscle to impress others. In pursuit of this, he chose to use steroids to accelerate his progress. Their relationship faced frequent challenges. There were times when they wouldn't speak for weeks but would eventually get back together. However, after he began using steroids, Amy and her friends noticed significant changes in his behavior. Jamie became increasingly aggressive and unpredictable. Their arguments grew more common, occurring both at school and outside of it. Jamie's treatment of Amy deteriorated, and some of his friends reported that he made hurtful comments that she did not deserve. Things got worse. At Amy's age, she didn't know what to focus on in a relationship or how to fight back against her boyfriend's controlling behavior. Jamie acted like he was in charge, trying to control every aspect of her life. Jamie began dictating who she could talk to and wanted to know where she was at all times. He even tried to create conflict between her and her closest friends and family. Jamie became increasingly controlling, telling her what to wear, how to look, and who she could be friends with. He tried to cut her off from school sports teams. Even though Amy complied with his demands, he continued to find new ways to insult and provoke her. Amy's friends often witnessed the humiliation she faced at Jamie's hands. Since 2020, several states have enacted laws classifying manipulative and controlling behavior as a crime. Research shows that this behavior often marks the beginning of a dangerous path that can lead to physical violence or even death for the victim. Unfortunately, at that time, had nothing to charge against him. Despite the fact that her friends were very worried about what was happening, Jamie's behavior became increasingly unpredictable and problems with the law began. In the 90s, he was arrested twice for armed assault on a person. However, due to his age and lack of previous offenses, Jamie got away with it. He also convinced his girlfriend to keep quiet about these incidents. During this time, Amy did not share much about her relationship difficulties with others. She and Jamie frequently broke up and got back together, indicating that their relationship was in trouble. Jamie eventually left and Amy informed her friends of the breakup, but they reconciled soon after. Amy rarely shared her problems, partly because she was raised by her mother, who worked long hours and could not fully deal with her daughter's personal problems. Therefore, Amy kept her feelings to herself. At the same time, they were dealing with housing issues after a long period of renting. During this time, Amy stayed with various friends and lived with Diane Viggers, one of Jamie's ex-girlfriends. Despite this relationship, they became good friends. The situation was expected to improve on September 5, 1991, when Amy, her mother, and brother prepared to move into their new home. They had been renting for a long time, which had put a strain on their family finances, making this move a much-anticipated change in their lives. Amy had been living with her friend Diane before this incident. After breaking up with her manipulative boyfriend again, she was determined not to get back together with him. That day, she attended another field hockey practice and excitedly told her friends about her decision to end the toxic relationship for good. However, she mentioned that her ex-boyfriend, Jamie, kept calling her. Although she tried to ignore him, he was persistent. He wanted to see her, but she refused. He eventually asked her if she would like to cut his hair as a farewell gesture to their past relationship. After some consideration, she agreed and made plans to visit Jamie that evening, planning to return home a few hours later. Amy did not come home on time, and Diane was very worried about her. Amy was only 14 years old, so the delay made her friend increasingly worried. Diane called Amy's mother, and she could not find her daughter either. Their concerns increased when they discovered that Amy had left her purse and personal belongings behind, indicating that she did not intend to be gone for long. After waiting until morning, they decided to contact the police. After arriving at the police station, Amy's mother made plans to meet Jamie, whom Amy was supposed to meet. Jamie was cooperative from the start. He spoke to both the mother and the police and answered their questions openly. He even joined in the search efforts in the area. Despite being the prime suspect in Amy's disappearance, no evidence of her has ever been found. Searches of Jamie's home and car have turned up nothing. On August 28, 1991, an anonymous informant contacted the police station, claiming to know the location of Amy's body. This revelation caught the police's attention, and they were keen to find out the identity of this informant and the source of his information. The informant was identified as 19-year-old Michael Melita, a friend of Jamie's. When the police arrived at his home, he promptly agreed to assist with the investigation. At the police department, he confessed everything he knew about the tragic events of August 23. He explained that on August 22, the day before, Amy had planned to go to the beach with her friends. Jamie discovered her plans and grew angry. Fearing that there would be other guys at the beach party, his jealousy intensified. He felt restless and wanted to control Amy. On that same day, he met with Michael and voiced his wish to kill his ex-girlfriend. Multiple individuals were aware of Jamie's harmful intentions, yet none reported these plans to the police. They failed to warn Amy or her parents about the potential threat. On the evening of August 23, Amy visited her ex-boyfriend's house, thinking she was just there to get a haircut. However, she found 3 other boys there, 15-year-old Dominic Scola, 19-year-old Michael Melita, and 17-year-old Scott Ward. Just before Amy arrived, Jamie took out a large knife and showed it to the others, saying it was for his ex-girlfriend. He then placed the knife on a dresser. Jamie then suggested that the group take a walk in the nearby woods. During the walk, he and Amy went ahead while the other 3 lost sight of them. Michael confessed that he didn't completely believe Jamie's intentions to harm Amy, but no one felt brave enough to stop him because they were scared. Ultimately, Michael was the only one who ran to the location where Jamie and Amy had gone. He discovered Jamie covered in blood. Amy suffered multiple stab wounds on her chest, back, and stomach. Despite her injuries, she attempted to get up and escape, but her attacker was relentless. Michael mentioned that he didn't hear her screams until it was too late to help her. After Amy, who had her throat cut, collapsed, she continued to fight for her life. In that moment, she managed to say, "Jamie, I love you," which only enraged her attacker further. Jamie then began to stomp on her head. Afterward, Jamie, covered in blood, returned to his friends and described the events in detail while waving a bloody knife. Michael noted that everyone was afraid of becoming the next target, so they supported Jamie's actions. They all went home together, where they spent several hours drinking and talking calmly. Jamie took a shower to wash off the blood and changed his clothes. Jamie and Michael walked into the woods to where Amy's body was left. It was dark by then. They wrapped her body in trash bags and joked about the situation, showing no remorse or regret. When they reached the pond, they tied several concrete blocks together and threw the body into the water from the dock. Jamie made a sarcastic comment as he drowned Amy's body. He then took a bloody bracelet and necklace from her, wiped the blood off them, and wore them around his neck. This behavior is typical of a serial killer who keeps trophies as a reminder of his crimes. After Michael explained everything to the police, he was asked again how he could be involved in Amy's death. He clarified that he did not stab her, he only helped his friend dispose of her body because he was threatened. Michael confessed that he was afraid of Jamie. He believed that if Jamie learned about his conversation with the police, he would be killed. According to Michael, at first, the group thought the idea of murder was a terrible joke, and they only grasped the seriousness of the situation when it was too late. As the situation progressed, the three friends went along with Jamie's plans to avoid provoking him. On August 28, the informant was taken to the pond he had described. Michael pointed out the spot where the body was disposed of. Around 7:30 a.m., divers discovered Amy's body, which was in a shocking condition. It was evident that she had been murdered violently. The forensic expert identified that she was wearing the same clothes she had on the day she went missing. Analysis confirmed that she died on Friday, the evening she disappeared. Additionally, experts validated all of Michael's statements about the injuries on her body. They found about 10 stab wounds and a severe cut to her throat. The police could not find Jamie. Jamie's mother said she did not know where he was. So the police decided to interview the young people that Michael had mentioned. It turned out that they had known about the murder plan for over a year. During this time, the couple frequently broke up and got back together after Amy decided to leave Jamie. He did not want to let her go because he could not allow her to be with someone else. Therefore, in the end, he decided to kill her. As the police questioned the young men, more disturbing details about the case emerged. Just before they broke up, Amy had told her boyfriend that she was pregnant. He was upset by the news, especially since Amy had intended to keep the baby. Jamie was furious and even gave money to friends to attack Amy, hoping she would lose the baby. He wanted to avoid the responsibility of being a father, but his friends refused to help him. One of Jamie's friends recalled Jamie shouting that Amy had never agreed to terminate the pregnancy. Jamie eventually decided to take action against her. However, after an autopsy, police discovered that Amy was not pregnant at the time of her death. The rumor of her pregnancy became one of many speculations in the case. However, this does not rule out the possibility that she may have been pregnant with Jamie's child and had terminated the pregnancy. Unfortunately, her physical condition makes it impossible to verify these claims. The police began talking to Diane, who had lived with Amy before she was murdered. It turned out that Diane was Jamie's ex-girlfriend and had gone through the same problems in her relationship with Jamie as Amy had. Diane completely empathized with Amy's experience in a toxic relationship. Diane had also faced abuse and pressure from Jamie, but she had successfully escaped the situation unscathed. Unbeknownst to her, Diane had known about Jamie's plan to kill Amy shortly before Amy moved in with her. Jamie had mentioned taking Amy for a walk in the woods where he would give her flowers, then stab her and dump her body in a pond. However, Diane found this story so unbelievable that she chose not to warn anyone about the potential danger. When the Jamie Fuller was arrested, he faced charges of first-degree murder. Jamie smiled throughout the court proceedings and even made jokes about the victim, showing no signs of regret or remorse. During his interrogation, he remained calm and attempted to shift the blame to his friends for Amy's murder. However, when other people close to the victim were questioned, it came to light that Michael had boasted about helping Jamie dispose of the body after the murder. He was subsequently arrested for being an accomplice. It was obvious that the remaining two friends could have been witnesses to the massacre but never reported it to the police. They also knew about their friend's intentions, which he had openly discussed. Nearly a year after Amy's funeral, a witness named Scott Ward gave an interview to a local newspaper. He expressed disbelief over the events and felt guilty for not sounding the alarm sooner, which might have prevented the tragedy. At that time, he was already under investigation. Other teenagers suggested that Michael was not as innocent as he appeared. They claimed he encouraged the murder of the girl and hinted that his involvement in the crime could be more significant than he admitted. Ultimately, the police determined that only Michael and Jamie were responsible for the murder, while the others were not connected to the crime and were not arrested. Public outrage grew as people needed to know the truth and find ways to protect their communities from criminals who would harm schoolgirls for no reason. Locals had good reason to believe that all four teenagers were involved in the tragedy. The boys' parents, however, maintained their son's innocence and denied any involvement in the crime. However, police had evidence that Jamie had openly discussed his plans throughout the day. His friends even pressured him to act on them. This behavior showed Jamie was struggling and felt compelled to prove his strength. What motivated Amy's murder? Was it jealousy, a psychotic episode, a desire to harm his child, or provocation? Although the young man was only 16 at the time of the crime, he was tried as an adult. Jamie maintained his innocence and was released on bail of $2,500, which his mother paid. His lawyers pointed out that he had consumed alcohol, and they argued that the combination with steroids could lead to uncontrollable aggression. Therefore, the defense aimed to classify the crime as non-premeditated murder due to insanity, claiming that excessive steroid use can result in psychosis and other mental health issues. The lawyers requested a psychiatric evaluation for Jamie, which involved several assessments by independent experts. All concluded that Jamie was mentally stable and fit to stand trial. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office argued that the attack was motivated by jealousy. They highlighted the manipulative behavior, strict control, and ongoing assaults that the Amy had endured in the months leading up to the incident. According to Michael's confession, Jamie sought revenge because Amy attended a beach party with her friends. Another friend in the group said Jamie believed that Amy's pregnancy had to be terminated at all costs. The prosecution presented several witnesses, including Jamie's friend Ronald, who had taken carpentry classes with him. In the spring of 1991, Ronald testified in court about Amy's pregnancy. During this testimony, Jamie allegedly mentioned that the only way to get rid of the baby was to kill Amy. Dominic, who was with them that night, testified that he saw Jamie and his girlfriend go into the woods. He then heard some screaming. Dominic then noticed that Jamie had blood on her clothes and hands. Jamie even showed them the bloody knife he used in the attack. The blade was disfigured, indicating extreme violence. Dominic confirmed what Michael had said. Jamie recounted the details of the massacre he had committed. He explained that he first gagged Amy, professed his love for her, and then stabbed her in the stomach. Even then, she was still alive when he slit her throat. Amy told him that she still loved him, which made Jamie so angry that he stomped on her neck and started jumping on her head. The young witnesses claimed that Jamie was sober throughout the attack. They had only consumed alcohol after the murder. Jamie's mother had previously told police that alcohol had a negative effect on him, leading to anger and aggression. She recounted an incident where he nearly destroyed her room in a drunken fight with her. However, alcohol was not a factor in this situation. The forensic expert who testified for the prosecution explained that the stab wound was so deep that it almost went all the way through Amy's body, indicating a high level of hatred behind the murder. There were no signs of sexual violence, suggesting the attack may have been motivated by revenge or jealousy. One of the stab wounds penetrated the bone, disfiguring the knife point, and Amy had extensive bruising on her face and head injuries. Jamie, speaking to the media, claimed that he could not kill Amy because he still loved her. This claim was a lie. His televised declaration of love shocked and devastated Amy's mother, who was struggling to cope with her loss, resorting to sedatives and seeking help from a psychologist. To her, Jamie's display of love was a cruel taunt. The hearing lasted 7 days, after which the jury began deliberating its verdict. The prosecution argued that Jamie was an extremely dangerous individual with the potential to become a serial killer and called for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The defense, in contrast, argued that the young man had lost control due to steroid abuse. The jury deliberated for 2 days, taking about 6 hours to reach a decision. Jamie was found guilty on October 23, 1992, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In a separate decision involving Jamie's friend, Michael, who had helped destroy evidence, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison after a hearing on his involvement. The victim's mother, Amy, felt this was an unfairly light sentence for his role in the crime. In 2013, new state laws were enacted that allowed minors convicted of serious offenses to apply for parole. Under these laws, each case had to be assessed individually. As a result of this legal change, Jamie, who had spent most of his adult life in prison, was given the chance for release in 2019 when he was 40 years old. Jamie's request for parole was reviewed but has been postponed indefinitely. The family of the brutal massacre victim has repeatedly appealed to law enforcement, demanding that this brutal man not be released under any circumstances. As of now, he is still incarcerated. Amy's mother struggled to cope with her daughter's death, requiring regular visits to a psychiatrist and a significant amount of medication. In 2009, her health declined rapidly, leading to her passing at the age of 57. Her family believes that her early death was directly linked to the loss of her beloved daughter. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Madison Sparrow. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow was born on September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia, United States. She is the daughter of Heather Sparrow Murphy and Richard Prestige. In her family, Madison has older sisters Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn, who was born in 1999 in Durango, Colorado, is Madison's older sister from her father's previous relationship. The family later settled in Newark, Newcastle County, Delaware. On October 5, 2010, her family welcomed a new member, baby Molly. Madison loves children and often takes on the role of the eldest in the family, which includes 8 cousins. She enjoys doing things that make people happy and frequently spends time playing with children or participating in entertainment shows such as magic shows. It is easy to catch Madison in a happy moment. Her laughter is contagious, showing her youthful and cheerful spirit. However, Madison can also be thoughtful and dreamy at times. Madison's father said that since she was a child, she has displayed her wisdom through careful observation and reflection before making decisions. Additionally, she is a very emotional person. Her warm hugs can uplift anyone's mood. For her friends and family, Madison is always a reliable confidant who genuinely cares about the happiness of those she loves. Madison is a curious girl who loves to explore new things, which led her to join the Girl Scouts, an organization for girls around the world. By the fall of 2012, all the Girl Scout troops were full, but thanks to her mother's efforts, Madison was able to join a group. Madison's mother led a new Brownies troop, and Madison joined at age 9. In recent years, Madison has become one of the top cookie sellers, winning numerous medals for her impressive sales. She has been involved with the Girl Scouts for nearly 10 years, during which time she has built a strong network of friendships. Currently, Madison volunteers with her younger SI. Stir Molly's troop, as she enjoys working with other young people and making a positive impact on their lives. Madison is a kind and generous girl who acts with commitment to her faith in God and service to her country. She is passionate about helping others and strictly adheres to the principles of the Girl Scouts. However, like any other young girl, Madison also enjoys spending time having fun and living life to the fullest. Even in her teenage years, she is always the life of the parties. She often plans parties with her friends, ranging from movie nights to full-blown beauty parties with manicures and pedicures. Madison frequently stays up all night, so it is not unusual for her to struggle to wake up by noon the next day. Before finishing elementary school, Madison met Annika Stalczynski, a girl her age who was born in Newark on July 9, 2003. They quickly became close friends and studied for exams together. Information about Annika's life is limited, but it is known that her parents are Robert Stalczynski and Robin Kars. In 2004, her family lived on Arona Mink Drive in Newark. After finishing elementary school, Annika and Madison went to middle school, where they made a new friend named Noah Sharp. Noah, a native of Newark, was born on August 23, 2001. Little is known about Noah's family and background, except that his mother, Nikki Sharp, has 2 other children, David and Brianna. The trio often went out for ice cream or spent time in the large green spaces around the city. When Noah and Madison met by chance, they felt an attraction to each other, and after just a few months, a teenage romance developed. At first, they were madly in love, but in early 2020, after more than a year together, Madison decided to break up with Noah without providing any reasons. They parted ways amicably and agreed to remain friends, but Noah was heartbroken because he still loved her deeply. During this time, Annika became Noah's trusted friend. They began to see each other more often and text almost every day. Although Noah's heart was still broken, he began dating another girl after a while. Despite his relationship with Annika, Noah kept in touch with Madison. He visited Madison on her 17th birthday, September 12, 2020, and brought her a gift. It seemed that Noah was still upset about the breakup. When Annika learned about her boyfriend's meeting with his ex-girlfriend, she felt jealous. She could not accept that he was still friends with his ex. Noah's sadness also turned to anger. He wanted to hurt Madison because he felt hurt. The following week, blinded by hatred and jealousy, Annika and Noah began planning to end Madison's life. They exchanged text messages, used FaceTime, and met in person to discuss weapons and how to dispose of the body after the crime. The messages they sent each other while planning the attack were horrifying and revealed their intention to cause Madison great pain. Annika made several suggestions, including using a knife to inflict severe damage to her heart. They also discussed the possibility of using a handgun or another blunt object. According to official documents, they quickly dismissed the idea of a handgun because it would make too much noise. Although Noah was not entirely confident, they decided to use a blunt object. During their discussions, they calculated the number of bricks they would need to hold Madison's body underwater if they decided to dump her there. When in doubt, One idea was to bury her since Noah could dig a hole and knew where to find a shovel. Eventually, they came up with what they believed was the perfect plan. Madison was an ice cream lover and also cherished Halloween. She eagerly awaited October each year to celebrate her favorite holiday. Throughout the month, Annika had been studying Madison's interests and taking advantage of them. On Friday, October 2, 2020, she called Madison to ask her out for ice cream and to spend a day together. Madison agreed because she hadn't seen her friend in a long time and also wanted to buy a gift for Molly, whose birthday was just 3 days away. That day, Madison wore black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, a blue sweatshirt that said New Jersey, and white ghost earrings. She rarely wore jewelry, especially earrings, but since she didn't have much time to prepare for Halloween, Madison decided to buy these earrings to match the holiday. At 2:44 p.m., she said goodbye to her mother, Heather, promised to see her later, and then left. Although nothing unusual happened at that time, the events that followed were extremely unsettling. That was the last time her mother saw her alive. Just hours later, Heather began receiving abusive text messages from Madison's phone number, along with information suggesting that Madison was supposed to be leaving the country. Heather thought it was a joke. She replied and wished Madison good luck in her endeavor, joking that she had forgotten to bring her passport, which was in the safe. However, Heather received no response. Even when she called her daughter, no one answered. Heather, who was hanging out with Molly and taking her to scout meetings and swimming lessons, was confused. The lack of response began to worry her. Heather decided to call Annika, knowing that they would meet later in the day. When Annika answered, she burst into tears and explained that Madison had insulted her and that she had dropped her off near a store. Annika then suggested contacting Noah, but he did not respond. Frustrated, Heather asked Annika to contact Noah again. The three of them chatted but did not get any information. Frustrated, Heather decided to go home. On the way home, Heather received several messages from her daughter's friends, who had also received strange messages and wanted to know what was going on. When she got home and did not search for any clues, Heather found no signs that her daughter had run away. Even the money she had received for her birthday, her clothes, and her C.D. cards were in her room. These messages were strange and nonsensical. Madison had no reason to run away, especially without a bag containing her clothes and money. When Madison did not return home at around 8:30 p.m., Heather contacted 911 and reported her daughter missing. Despite repeated attempts to reach out to people, all her efforts were in vain. After being informed of the situation, Heather's parents traveled from another city to support their daughter. Furthermore, she notified Madison's father, with whom she had divorced, who now lived in Colorado. He quickly shared the information on social media, calling for help in finding his daughter. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, the search for Madison, 17, who was reported missing, continued. Delaware State Police issued a yellow alert to activate all necessary procedures to search for missing persons. Over the course of 2 days, police search teams, family and friends searched farms near the University of Delaware, where Madison was last seen. The media also disseminated information about the search, asking people to come forward with any details. Delaware State Police have begun questioning Madison's friends, and evidence points to her ex-boyfriend as a suspect. According to information, the girl went to the woods in Newark behind the elementary school, where she was also seen with Noah on the day she went missing. Detectives then detained and questioned him for nearly 9 hours from October 4th to 5th, but he claimed he had no idea what had happened. He eventually confessed to his actions and revealed that Annika was an accomplice. He explained that Annika hated Madison because she was jealous of their relationship. He also shared his deep feelings about breaking up with her. According to Noah's testimony, he drove Madison to the woods behind the elementary school, then hid behind the bushes with an aluminum baseball bat. As Madison happily walked along the trail, he suddenly emerged from his hiding place and hit Madison twice in the head. Noah admitted to putting all his strength into the second blow, adding that it was then that he became enraged after months of losing control over the girl who had broken his heart. Unable to control himself, he continued to strike her body multiple times. After the attack, the two used Annika's car to transport her body to a location near the intersection of I-95 and the Delaware state line, about 15 minutes away from the scene and near a warehouse. Once there, they attempted to drown the body in the river. Unsuccessful, they opted to bury it in a shallow grave they dug in the same location. Armed with detailed information from the suspect, investigators carefully searched the designated area. There, they discovered an aluminum baseball bat used as a weapon, with traces of blood. The crime scene also revealed the victim's clothing, with some items showing evidence of having been burned. The suspect then led law enforcement to a large plot of land near the intersection of I-95 and the Delaware state line, where he and his accomplice had secretly buried the body. On Monday, October 5, 2020, Corporal Heather Piper announced the discovery of Madison's body. The news sent shockwaves through the victim's family, friends, and community. Several days later, on Saturday, October 9th, hundreds gathered at the high school football field to remember and honor Madison. An autopsy revealed that Madison died from blunt force trauma to the head. Experts also found the DNA of Noah and Annika on physical evidence collected at the scene and where the bodies were found. Noah faces charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. He has been placed in a correctional facility on a $1 million bail. More than a month after the tragic event and after processing the necessary evidence, Annika, 17, was also arrested. She was indicted by a Newcastle County grand jury on charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. Meanwhile, Madison's family has been struggling. Heather has repeatedly stated that the exact cause of her daughter's death may never be known. Although Noah admitted his guilt to the police, he did not plead guilty in his formal court filing. This has led to speculation that his defense attorney may argue that he was mentally unstable. In some cases, attorneys often attempt to defend their clients by referring to their mental health status. Similarly, during a preliminary hearing, Noah's attorney stated that Noah was being treated for schizophrenia and was under the care of a psychiatrist at the time of the murder. Noah's attorney confirmed that he had been injured in Chester County, Pennsylvania, about 3 weeks before the murder. The attorney explained that Noah had suffered memory loss and other problems as a result of the head injury. However, the attorney did not provide specific information about the cause and severity of the injury. In May 2021, Annika pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree conspiracy. Her attorneys negotiated with prosecutors, and Annika agreed to testify against Noah regarding his intention to kill Madison. Several people close to the victim had reported to the police about alter ego, Noah's alleged alter ego. However, prosecutors argued that Noah himself had disseminated this information, intending to use it at trial later as part of his plan to kill Madison. After 2 years of waiting, the defendant's trial began on October 20, 2022, in Newcastle County. During the proceedings, approximately 30 witnesses were called, primarily by Deputy Attorney General Matt Foley and an assistant prosecutor. The courtroom played hours of video recordings of Noah's interviews with state police detectives. Viewers heard Noah's changing story until he finally confessed. The defense tried to challenge this evidence, arguing that the police had interrogated their client for too long. Attorney Monica Jerome noted that the detectives interfered with the interrogation, directing Noah to say what they wanted and forcing him to say it. However, most people viewed this as a last-ditch effort to justify the murderer in any way possible. The prosecution presented text messages exchanged between Noah and Annika, which they claimed showed that the two had planned the crime. Faced with this evidence, the defense attempted to convince the court that someone else had control of the suspect's device and that he was not the one who contacted Annika. However, the testimonies of Noah's mother and brother contradicted each other several times when they were called to testify. Nikia stated that her son came home on the evening of October 2nd without being wet. Meanwhile, David said that his brother was wet and looked like he had just come out of a swamp. Nikia reported that when her son arrived home, Annika came in and seemed normal. David, on the other hand, claimed that Annika came in angry and slammed the door. Prosecutor Matt Froley asked Nikia if she had discussed the evidence against Noah with him, to which she replied no. However, prosecutors obtained a recording of a phone call that took place a month before the trial, in which the defendant and his mother discussed surveillance camera footage at the elementary school. During that conversation, Noah informed his mother that his face was not visible in the video showing him and Annika near the school an hour before Madison was murdered. His mother reacted with relief at this news. However, the video showed an African-American man of similar height and build to Noah, holding a baseball bat while walking into the woods with a girl. The defense questioned the defendant's relatives about the two injuries he allegedly sustained. The first was a head injury on September 13, 2020. The second was another unconfirmed injury he suffered after falling off his bike, just hours before his police interview on October 4th. Noah's lawyers argued that these injuries could have caused dissociative amnesia, attempting to justify the statements he made to the police. The court considered the arguments of both the prosecution and the defense regarding the victim's injuries. Annika, the accused, gave a 3-hour testimony that supported the prosecution's arguments. During her testimony, she calmly explained that Noah had convinced her that Madison had talked badly about her behind her back. However, Madison's family and friends insisted that she had never spoken ill of her friends. After 8 days of trial and more than 250 pieces of evidence presented by the prosecutors, the jury took just 3 hours to reach its final verdict. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the jury's verdict was announced, neither Noah nor his mother showed any emotion, Noah simply reneged and smiled at his mother. The Madison family cried tears of relief before leaving the courtroom. In Annika's case, when she was convicted, prosecutors stated that under Delaware law, she would be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, since she was a juvenile at the time of the crime. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Dishon. Jessica Dishon was born on May 2, 1982, in the small town of Shepherdsville, Kentucky, USA. It was a quiet place where many residents made their living from farming and were very close to one another. Jessica had 2 younger brothers, Christopher and Michael. From a young age, she helped her parents, Mike and Edna, take care of them while they were at work. This made Jessica more independent, and her parents could always count on her. When she was 15, she started working part-time at a local restaurant, saving money to buy her first car. She dreamed of owning a red Pontiac, and after a few years, she had saved enough money to make this dream come true. Despite her part-time job, Jessica still achieved very good academic results and began planning to go to college to become an accountant. In the fall of 1999, when Jessica was 17, she entered her senior year and started dating a boy, which made her very excited. On the morning of Friday, September 10th, as usual, Jessica's parents went to work while she was still sleeping, and her younger brothers went to the bus stop and then to school. Jessica stayed home and was supposed to drive to school by herself. However, right after her brothers left, around noon, her mother, Edna, returned home and immediately noticed something strange. Jessica's car was parked in front of the house, even though she was supposed to be in class at that time. Edna went to Jessica's room, guessing that she might have overslept and not gone to school. However, Jessica was not in her bedroom. Edna then thought that, for some reason, Jessica might have asked her father, Mike, to drive her to school. She immediately called Mike, but he said he had gone to work alone that morning. Edna suspected that there was a problem with Jessica's car, so she took the spare key to try to start it. However, as she approached the car, she noticed a few disturbing things. The driver's door was slightly open. Jessica's cell phone was on the seat with the numbers 9 and 1 displayed on the screen, and under the front seat were a pair of shoes and her keys. In the back seat were her textbooks, work clothes, and purse. Edna immediately worried that the worst could have happened. It was clear that someone had tried to call 911 from Jessica's phone but couldn't get through. Furthermore, Jessica couldn't have left all her belongings in the car and left unexpectedly. Her family lived in the suburbs, so she would have had to walk several miles. Jessica's parents called the school and learned that she had missed class. However, the school did not notify them as they should have. A few hours later, Jessica's best friend from the place where they both worked called her parents, saying that Jessica had not shown up for her shift, which made them even more worried. Worried about Jessica's absence from school and work, as well as her belongings, including her phone with the 9 and 1 dial displayed being left in an unlocked car. Her parents decided to call the police. However, the sheriff simply assumed that Jessica might have wandered off and would eventually return home. He did not notice that one of her shoes was left in the car, making it difficult for her to travel far without it. Jessica's parents tried to convince the sheriff that their daughter might be in danger, but despite their pleas, he refused to open an investigation, leaving them with no choice but to return home. After that, her parents took it upon themselves to search for her and contact acquaintances, but no one had any information about her. The next day, her parents returned to the sheriff and reported that Jessica had not returned home. This time, the police went to check Jessica's car but found another problem. The officers had searched the car without gloves, touching everything inside with their bare hands. They also did not follow standard procedure for checking Jessica's room. Jessica's parents, once again frustrated with the lack of professionalism from law enforcement, so sought the help of local media to draw attention to their daughter's disappearance and the police's lack of concern. Together with relatives and friends, they searched on their own and distributed flyers with information about Jessica. The search was led by Jessica's father and his brother, who were familiar with the area. Fearing the worst, they decided to search near a local river. The area had a bad reputation as it was dense, isolated, and popular with drug dealers and other criminals. For hours, Jessica's relatives searched the difficult terrain along the river but found no trace of her. The next morning, something unusual happened. Jessica's parents were at home, and their son was playing in the yard. Suddenly, the boy ran into the house, saying he heard a cry for help that sounded like his sister's. Jessica's father immediately grabbed the shotgun and ran outside to find the source of the cry. At the same time, his brother drove up to the house to join the search. Not long after, they noticed smoke coming from the property of their neighbor, a 40-year-old man named David Brooks. When they approached, they saw him burning something on the ground, which looked very suspicious. Jessica's father asked David for permission to search his farm. However, David refused and asked them to leave. It was not just David's strange behavior that was noteworthy. Before Jessica's disappearance, her family had maintained a normal relationship with David and his family. However, after Jessica went missing, David began to act strangely. He often drove slowly past Jessica's family's house and stared at them with a disturbing expression. Additionally, Jessica's parents received strange phone calls from a man who only panted without saying anything. Jessica's family suspected David might have had something to do with their daughter's disappearance, but they could not understand why he was behaving so oddly. Jessica's parents decided to contact the police again, despite having previously failed to get significant attention from the agency. They shared their observations, urged the officers to search David's property with dogs, and agreed to use Jessica's clothes to search for clues. The dogs led them to a fire pit on David's property, but they found no significant evidence. However, they did discover a pair of black gloves in one of the sheds, which indicated the presence of an odor associated with decomposition. Despite David's suspicious behavior, the police were still unable to connect him to Jessica's disappearance, and once again, they came up empty-handed. Frustrated with the local police, Jessica's father decided to contact the FBI. While the FBI typically did not investigate if only based on calls from relatives of missing persons, they decided to get involved immediately due to the disturbing facts presented by Jessica's parents. After a careful investigation, the FBI concluded that something truly terrible might have happened to Jessica. From this point on, a real investigation began, one that the local police had been reluctant to conduct. FBI agents collected fingerprints from Jessica's room and car, seized all potential evidence for analysis, and sent it to the lab. They also organized an extensive ground search using helicopters and gathered volunteers. Additionally, they thoroughly examined the bottom of the pond near Jessica's house, considering the possibility that her body might be there. FBI agents conducted a thorough search of David's farm and found a printed photo of Jessica. After this discovery, detectives were almost certain that David was involved in her disappearance. They also suspected his 35-year-old brother, Joseph, because he acted strangely while police were searching his property. Although investigators did not find enough evidence to arrest the brothers, they focused their efforts on thoroughly searching the area, as it was becoming increasingly likely that Jessica was no longer alive. On September 27, 17 days after Jessica went missing, police received a call from a woman driving along the road near where Jessica's father had been searching for her. The woman had seen a strange object near a tree on the side of the road and decided to check it out. The woman was shocked to discover it was a body. She immediately called the police. The FBI arrived at the scene and confirmed that the body was that of a young woman who was missing several fingers and toes. She had been bound with a rope that had traces of red and silver paint on her feet, and some of her clothing was also missing, suggesting that she had been sexually assaulted. Unfortunately, the state of decomposition of the body made it difficult to identify the victim. The police went to Jessica's home and asked her parents to assist in the identification process. Jessica's father was unable to look directly at body, but her mother agreed to do so. When she arrived at the scene, Edna initially could not identify her. However, Edna later noticed a small butterfly tattoo on the body that was identical to her daughter's and located in the same spot. Medical professionals later confirmed the deceased's identity as Jessica Dishon and determined that her cause of death was strangulation. Several bruises were also found on her body. The autopsy revealed that she had been alive for about 3 days after her disappearance, as her legs, arms, and fingers were still intact. This indicated that the police had a chance to save her, but they did not take any action to do so. After Jessica's body was discovered, the FBI decided to re-interview David. In the first interview, David claimed to have seen Jessica near her home on the morning she went missing. However, in a subsequent interview, he changed his story, stating that he had not seen her at all that day. He then claimed that he had been home in bed with his wife that morning. When detectives questioned David's wife, she contradicted his account. The FBI continued to question David, asking him what he would do if they found his fingerprints on the victim's body, even though no such evidence was discovered. David's response was suspicious. He said he would have to confess everything in that case. He subsequently failed a polygraph test, prompting the FBI to arrest him and proceed with trial. Although no solid evidence linked David to the murder, there were troubling circumstantial signs of his involvement, and the likelihood of a guilty verdict remained relatively low. Investigators continued to seek additional evidence as they prepared for trial. They recalled finding a rope similar to the one used to bind the victim's legs during a search of David's car. However, no DNA was found on it, making it an inconclusive piece of evidence. The trial began in January 2003, and David's attorney argued that there was insufficient evidence to convict his client. During the investigation, authorities discovered several missing body parts of the victim near the scene. They placed the parts in special containers and turned them over to local police, provide the requirement to keep them in a refrigerator. However, they left the containers at room temperature, which caused the parts to decompose quickly. Because the DNA and other evidence against David were not strong enough and the jury could not reach a unanimous decision, he was released. Under state law, he could only be charged again if new evidence was found. For Jessica's parents, this was a devastating blow. They were almost certain that David was the culprit behind their daughter's death. Furthermore, if the police had taken their job more seriously, their daughter might have been saved. Ultimately, they lost all hope for justice. In the years that followed, the case remained unsolved and gradually faded from memory. In 2012, a new detective, Lynn Hunt, joined the local police department. She was assigned to investigate cold cases, initially focusing on the murder of Jessica Dishon. When she reviewed the case files, she was shocked by the negligence of her predecessors. Most of the documents were filled with errors, lacked references to conversations with interested parties, and the evidence was not properly documented. The case had been handled so inefficiently that she had to start the investigation from scratch, although already 13 years after the murder. Lynn's first step was to contact Jessica's family. One of Jessica's brothers, now grown and living on his own, gave Lynn a box of Jessica's belongings that had been taken from her car. He had kept it since the police returned the items to the family. Lynn was once again confronted with her colleagues' poor handling of evidence, as it had not been properly stored. Although, after all these years, these items were unlikely to help her, she persisted in examining everything she could find. Through her research, she discovered information about David's medical examination results, which showed that his IQ was only 61, extremely low. This raised concerns about police operations, particularly regarding the questioning of him. Based on his significantly low IQ, he may not have fully understood the questions and may have given incomplete answers. This could indicate that he may not have been involved in the case, as his unusual behavior could be explained by his extremely low IQ. After a thorough investigation of everyone involved or living near the scene, nearly 15 years after Jessica's death, a colleague from another department called Lynn and shared new information from an inmate at the Kentucky State Prison who claimed to know the true identity of Jessica's killer. Lynn approached this lead with skepticism because, many times, when inmates try to provide information to the police, the end result is often frustration and wasted time. Many of them make up stories in hopes of getting released early or improving their prison conditions. However, she understood that this lead could not be ignored without verification. She visited the prison and met a man who was said to have relevant information. According to the man, he had shared a cell with a convicted child molester, the same crime as him. They became friends and exchanged details about their crimes. One day, the inmate told him that he had killed Jessica. The informant then revealing the man's name. It was Stanley Dish, Jessica's uncle and her father's younger brother. According to the informant, Stanley had confessed that he had sexually abused Jessica for years while they lived in the same household. Stanley had threatened to kill Jessica or her relatives if she spoke out. In the spring of 1999, when Jessica had a boyfriend, Stanley began to fear that she would eventually reveal her abuse by him. On the morning of September 10th, Stanley went to Jessica's home while she was alone. Jessica was getting into her car to leave when Stanley asked her to break up with her boyfriend. Jessica refused and threatened to report him if he did not leave her alone. When he refused, Stanley began to threaten Jessica. She tried to call 911, but Stanley grabbed her. Eventually, Jessica broke free and ran into the house. Stanley chased her down, beat her, then tied her up with bed sheets and took her to a nearby abandoned warehouse, where she was later found dead. Stanley held her captive for a long time, torturing and mentally abusing her before killing her. He then moved her body to a visible location near the road and buried it beneath the warehouse. He also claimed that after the murder, he had dismembered some of her body parts, hoping to deceive the police into thinking it was a drug deal gone wrong. Detective Lynn realized that information about the dismembered body parts had never been made public. Only Jessica's closest friends knew about it, so the informant could not have made this up. Finally, the man added that Stanley had buried Jessica's shoe under a broken tree near the shed. Lynn decided to verify all this information by searching for evidence. However, the local police station was short-staffed, so no one there could help her. She contacted Jessica's brother and a few other relatives, who agreed to join the search. She didn't tell them that Stanley might be the killer because she wanted to find some evidence to support these shocking accusations first. On the first day, they didn't find any clues in the heavy rain. They dug in areas that matched the description, but to no avail. The next day, Jessica's brother and Lynn returned to the scene. On the way, he showed her an abandoned shed on the side of the road. They went there and started digging inside, and almost immediately found a significant breakthrough. They discovered a buried bedsheet. Lynn collected this evidence and quickly went to Jessica's house. Over the years, Jessica's room had been kept exactly as it had been when her missing. Thanks to this, Lynn was able to confirm that the bedsheet found was part of Jessica's bedding, as it was not on the bed, and the other linens had the same pattern. Shortly after the evidence was discovered, Stanley was arrested and questioned. Although he appeared very nervous during the interrogation, he still refused to admit to the crime. He was eventually charged with murder, and the case went to trial. Jessica's father, Mike, could not believe that his own brother would commit such a cruel act against his daughter. He went through a period of complete denial but eventually accepted this unbearable truth. He recalled that in the early days of Jessica's disappearance, it was Stanley who suggested searching for the body near the riverbank. However, during the search, he suddenly felt nauseous and was taken home by his brother. It turned out that this incident occurred just a few hundred meters from the warehouse where Jessica lived, suggesting that Stanley had deliberately distracted them from searching for her while she was still alive. During the preparation for the trial, Detective Lynn carefully researched Stanley's past. She discovered that he had a previous conviction for assaulting another girl in the family. In addition, several other women reported that he had sexually abused them when they were children. He often took advantage of his relationship to stay at the victims' homes, then committed the crimes by threatening them not to speak out. The police concluded that he had committed these acts over a period of 3 decades. However, Detective Lynn found that securing a murder conviction would be difficult due to the lack of direct evidence such as fingerprints or DNA. She dug deeper into the case and stumbled upon an old box of files that had not been examined. When she looked through the contents, she was shocked again by the incompetence of those who had originally handled the case. The box contained a letter dated June 26, 2002, in which another informant had written to the police with the same story that Lynn had only heard 12 years later from a Kentucky inmate. In the summer of 2002, Stanley had been convicted of assaulting an underage relative. During that time, he had told a fellow inmate, who happened to be a police informant, about killing Jessica. The fellow inmate had written a letter to the department handling the case, revealing the gruesome details of what Stanley had done to his niece. The police simply ignored the letter and, perhaps believing that David had been involved all those years ago, did not consider other suspects. Lynn was frustrated by the lack of professionalism from her colleagues. Had they paid more attention to their work, the case might have been solved in 2002. For years, Jessica's family could only wait for the trial, hoping that Stanley would finally face the justice that had been delayed for his actions. The case began in 2015, and Stanley proclaimed his innocence. In court, Jessica's parents could barely look at the relative who had destroyed their lives. They were also furious that he would not admit to his actions to help them gain closure. The prosecution was concerned that the chances of securing a conviction for murder were slim, mainly due to the lack of substantial evidence. They were also worried about the charges of assault against the other girls in the family, as these witnesses would have to come to court and describe Stanley's behavior toward them in detail. To clarify, the prosecutor negotiated a plea deal with Stanley. Under the terms of the deal, the death penalty would be waived if Stanley pleaded guilty to the assault on his relative and to Jessica's murder. Stanley agreed to the deal, however. Part of the agreement stipulated that he did not have to reveal any further details about the crime. Jessica's parents were unhappy about this, as they wanted to know the whole truth. In the end, Stanley was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Stanley was sentenced at the age of 56 and could have been released at the age of 71. After the trial, Jessica's father stated that if his brother hadn't died in prison, he would have waited for him to figure things out for himself. In 2019, Stanley gave his first interview and insisted that he did not kill Jessica. He claimed he was on his way to work that morning, but 2 decades later, he couldn't prove it. He could not explain why 2 independent informants had similar stories, including details only the killer would know, such as where the bedsheets were buried. David Brooks stated that police had not ruled out his involvement in the case. Stanley, who knew him, may have asked for his help in disposing of the victim's belongings. Due to his low IQ, Brooks may not have understood the full extent of the situation. It is possible that he burned Jessica's clothes in a fire, and that Stanley gave him gloves that had a scent detectable by dogs. However, the truth may never be revealed, as Brooks passed away in 2021 due to heart problems. On the 3rd day after Jessica went missing, her younger brother heard screams outside and thought it was his sister calling for help. However, it is impossible to say for certain what happened at that time. Jessica could still be alive, but Stanley might have kept her in a shed a few miles from her home. In this case, it is more likely that the child imagined the incident due to stress or that someone else was screaming. However, there is another theory, although it seems unlikely. We know that shortly after Jessica's father rushed out, Stanley drove up to the house, which indicates he was nearby. Therefore, it is possible that the girl was in his car with her mouth covered or unconscious. In spite of this hypothesis appears very unlikely. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Hiringa. Jessica Hiringa was born on July 16, 1987, in Norton Shores, Michigan, to a humble family, and that included a sister. At 22, she had a son named Zahn with her long-term partner Dakota Quayle Dyer, and by 25, the couple was still together and raising Zahn in a rented home. Jessica worked as a manager at a local Exxon gas station near Lake Michigan, where she was well-liked by customers for her friendly nature. She often worked extra hours to provide for Zahn, and her ambition was evident in her diary entries, which expressed her desire to pursue a college degree in accounting. However, Financial constraints prevented her from achieving this goal. Dakota, her partner and the father of her child, was unable to fully support their family, leading to disagreements, and their relationship was strained. Despite being engaged, their wedding plans were repeatedly delayed due to various circumstances. On April 26, 2013, she started the day by shopping at a nearby store around 3 p.m. and then drove to work. Arriving at 4:35 p.m., Jessica began her night shift at the Exxon gas station. As she began her shift, she was the only employee on duty that night. At 11:14 p.m., a customer called 911 to report a strange situation at the Exxon station. He had entered the store to pay for his gas but found no one to take his payment. The store was unattended, with the door open and lights on. The customer informed the dispatcher 911, "The store is empty, but there are 2 cars parked outside, mine and another one. It looks unusual." Police officers arrived at the Exxon gas station about 10 minutes after the call. They inspected the petrol station and found no signs of a struggle or disturbance. Everything was in order. Inside the store, police discovered Jessica's coat and purse, containing $400, and her car and house keys in the back room. A single drop of Jessica's blood was found near the back door. Police also found a cap from a Walther P22 semi-automatic pistol's laser sight and 2 watch batteries on the floor. The cash register was intact, with all the money still in it. The last transaction was recorded at 10:52 p.m. for a lighter. Unfortunately, the gas station did not have interior surveillance cameras. Jessica's pack of cigarettes was left on the counter next to the cash register, suggesting she had temporarily stepped away. Her car was locked and parked outside, but Jessica was nowhere to be found. She had mysteriously vanished. The police discovered that the gas station was unattended, so they contacted the owner and informed her. The owner then asked a nearby manager to come to the gas station for protection. The police also notified Jessica's family that she was missing. Her parents began searching for clues and called her friends to see if they had any information. One friend reported being at the gas station around 8 to 9 p.m. that day and said everything seemed normal. However, a fellow employee who arrived to close the station shortly after recalled a suspicious incident. Around 11 p.m., the employee and her boyfriend drove by the station on a motorcycle and saw a silver Chrysler Town Country minivan parked near the back door with its door open. They initially thought Jessica might be involved in a theft, so they kept watching. The employee saw a young man with disheveled wavy hair and an orange sweatshirt near the minivan. He repeatedly opened and closed the rear door before driving away. Further investigation revealed a surveillance video from a nearby building showing a silver Chrysler passing the Exxon gas station at 11:02 p.m. The police also spoke to Christian, who reported seeing the man in the minivan talking to Jessica earlier. Christian initially believed the man was just flirting with Jessica because of her attractiveness. A composite sketch of the suspect in Jessica's disappearance was created with the help of Christian, who had seen the man near a minivan. The suspect was described as a young male with light skin, dark wavy hair, a stocky build, and approximately 6 feet tall. 3 days after Jessica went missing, the sketch was released. In spite of, police received many calls, but no information was available that helped the case. A main issue in the investigation was the large number of silver Chrysler minivans in the United States. Specifically, in Michigan, there were 15,000 registered vehicles of the same kind. This made it difficult to identify the driver of the minivan related to Jessica's disappearance. Jessica Hiringa's boyfriend, Dakota, was initially suspected in her disappearance due to their frequent arguments. However, Dakota denied this and cooperated with the investigation, stating he was at home with their son on the night of her disappearance. Since Dakota didn't have a car, he couldn't have gone to her workplace, and his phone records confirmed his alibi. After verifying his story, the police excluded him from the list of suspects. Further investigation revealed that Jessica's friendly and outgoing personality helped her attract many admirers. Jess Ammerman, a 37-year-old married plumber, was one such admirer. On the evening of her disappearance, around 9:30 p.m., Jess visited Jessica at the gas station, confessed his feelings, and claimed he was willing to divorce his wife for her. However, Jessica rejected his advances. He then left the station, called his wife, and spoke with her for about 50 minutes before returning home. After undergoing a polygraph test and being interrogated and interviewed along with his wife, the police also cleared Jess Ammerman as a suspect. Rob Fallett, the brother of the manager at the Exxon gas station, where Jessica worked, was initially considered a suspect in her disappearance. Around 9 p.m. on the day she vanished, Rob visited the station and reported that Jessica appeared upset. When he asked her what was wrong, she shared that she was having family problems. Rob offered to let her stay with him, but she declined the offer. Fallett then left to go night fishing in a nearby lake. After investigating Rob's alibi, detectives discovered his phone records supported his claim and he was cleared of the crime. Search and rescue operations for Jessica were launched with helicopters, specially trained dogs, and thorough searches of homes, businesses, wells, wooded areas, and Lake Michigan. However, no leads were found, causing the case to reach a standstill. About a year later, in February 2014, a similar incident occurred in Michigan. A young woman with a similar appearance to Jessica was kidnapped and attacked by a man while walking home late at night. She was taken to his apartment, where she was attacked, and her life was threatened. The woman was eventually released after several hours. The suspect, 42-year-old Brad Allen Mason. Mason was eventually found by police, but he resisted arrest, threatening officers with a fake gun. Then, he was fatally shot during the confrontation. Brad had a history of crime, including being convicted of kidnapping in 2004 and arrested for indecent exposure in 2011. In 2014, he lived in a dorm near the Exxon gas station where Jessica worked. Despite this, investigators couldn't find any evidence linking Mason to Jessica's disappearance. 2 years after Jessica disappeared, a similar incident happened in 2016. A young woman was walking home from a friend's party late at night when she got lost on a dark street. A man in a silver minivan stopped and asked if she was okay, offering to give her a ride. She refused the ride but asked to use his phone. The man agreed, but only if she got into the minivan. Once she was inside, he locked the door, said his phone was dead, and he pulled out his gun, asked her to keep quiet. Then he started driving. The woman was feeling extremely unwell and nauseated, so she asked the driver to roll down the window for her. She quickly took advantage of the opportunity and jumped out of the moving vehicle through the window, running to a nearby house for safety. The driver quickly sped away and escaped. The victim immediately called the police and provided a detailed description of her kidnapper. By examining footage from nearby surveillance cameras, the police were able to identify the license plate number of the vehicle, a silver Chrysler Town & Country. The investigation eventually identified the driver as Jeffrey Willis, 46 years old. Jeffrey Willis, a factory worker, lived a reclusive and humble life, with no criminal record. When police found and searched his minivan, they discovered a semi-automatic Walther P22 pistol. It was discovered that this pistol had been reported stolen by a coworker of Jeffrey some time ago. Jeffrey was arrested and taken into custody. Upon searching his residence, police found a collection of various BDSM items, including handcuffs, chains, ropes, gags, a vibrator, a video camera, and a bullet matching the Walther P22 pistol. They also discovered medical supplies and sedatives, which included insulin syringes with unknown substances and disposable gloves. Investigators found a diagram of the woman's body, with some parts marked. Upon examining his computer, several distressing videos were found, showing scenes of young women being kidnapped. A hidden hard drive discovered in a ventilation duct contained secretly recorded footage of Jeffrey's female neighbors swimming. Furthermore, on his computer, police discovered a folder labeled Victims that included 2 subfolders. The first subfolder was named after missing woman Jessica, and the second subfolder contained information about a murdered woman named Rebecca. Rebecca Blech, a 36-year-old woman who suffered a tragic fate. Approximately 1 year after Jessica went missing, Rebecca was murdered on June 29, 2014. Rebecca had gone out for a run in the evening but never returned home. She was discovered by her neighbors lying on the road, with her clothing disheveled. Initially, it was believed that she had been hit by a car. Although Rebecca was unconscious, she still had a pulse when found. Emergency services were immediately called, but unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries before she could be saved. Autopsy reports later revealed that Rebecca died from 3 gunshot wounds to her back and head, along with multiple bruises on her wrists and legs. At the time of Rebecca's death, the suspect has not yet been identified. However, 2 years after Jeffrey's arrest, investigators uncovered new evidence linking Rebecca's murder to the handgun found in his small truck. Prosecutors alleged that Jeffrey had attempted to abduct Rebecca and bring her back to his home, but when Rebecca resisted, he shot her and fled the scene. Despite his denial, forensic analysis discovered Rebecca's DNA on a glove found in Jeffrey's residence. As a result, he was convicted of Rebecca's murder and received a life sentence. While serving his sentence, Jeffrey faced additional charges related to the kidnapping of Jessica, despite he consistently denying any involvement in her disappearance. Nonetheless, a review of his phone records revealed that he was present at the Exxon gas station where Jessica was last seen on the night she vanished. He then went to his grandfather's house, about 13 minutes from the station. When police arrived at that house, they discovered something surprising. Although the front door was secured with heavy locking, the police were able to break in easily. What they discovered was disturbing. In the basement, they found a large stash of cleaning supplies, including various powders and bleaches, that had all been manufactured in early 2013, around the same time Jessica disappeared. It was found that Jeffrey had been absent from his job on April 27, 2013, the day after Jessica's disappearance. Colleagues reported that his absence was unusual. When he returned to work a few days later, he had noticeable deep scratches on his face and hands. This has made people who know him suspicious. A woman who visited the gas station on April 25, the evening before Jessica vanished, contacted the police. She had arrived at the station late that evening and expressed her concern to Jessica about being alone at such a late hour. Jessica acknowledged her concern with a nod. At that moment, an unknown man inside the station overheard the conversation and reassured the visitor, saying, "Don't worry, Jessica has customers who look after her." The man then left the gas station. Despite the stranger's reassurance, the visitor remained concerned about Jessica's safety and waited in her car outside until Jessica finished her shift and headed home. Unfortunately, Jessica disappeared the following day. In 2016, the witness positively identified Jeffrey as the unknown man, recalling his presence at the gas station. Further investigation revealed that Jeffrey had frequently visited the Exxon gas station, interacting with Jessica at least 15 times prior to her disappearance. Kevin Bloom, a 48-year-old prison guard and Jeffrey's cousin, was arrested. During questioning, Kevin's statements were inconsistent, ultimately leading him to confess. He revealed details about Rebecca's death that were not publicly known at the time, and also admitted to helping Jeffrey hide Jessica's body. Kevin described how, on April 27, the day after Jessica's abduction, Jeffrey invited him to a party at his house. When Kevin arrived, he found Jessica lying lifeless and bound on the floor. Kevin and Jeffrey wrapped Jessica's body in a sheet and drove to a forest, where Jeffrey had already dug a grave. They buried Jessica and then returned home. When the police asked Kevin to take them to the burial site, he had difficulty remembering the exact location. Despite searching the forest for a while, he was unable to pinpoint the spot where they had buried Jessica's body. The trial of Jeffrey began, even though Jessica's body had not been found. The prosecution presented strong evidence to charge Jeffrey with kidnapping and murder. They alleged that he had been stalking Jessica for a long time. On April 26, 2013, Jeffrey allegedly parked near the gas station's entrance, went inside, and hit Jessica on the head with his gun. During the assault, the gun's laser sight cover fell off, and Jessica's blood was flowing to the floor. Jeffrey then allegedly dragged she out through the exit, put her in the back seat of his car, and drove her to his late grandfather's house. Forensic analysis of Jeffrey's devices revealed that he saved photos and news articles about the search for Jessica on his computer. As investigators followed the case, they found that he used a password that included her initials and the date April 27, 2013. This suggests that April 27, 2013, was likely the day she died, one day after her disappearance. Jeffrey maintained his innocence, claiming he was at home on the night Jessica was kidnapped. His lawyers pointed out that there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime, and no DNA evidence belonging to Jessica was found in his home or vehicle. Jeffrey's defense team argued that Jessica had been struggling with serious substance abuse problems in the time before her disappearance, suggesting that her kidnapping might be connected to her involvement in the illicit drug trade. Despite his claims of innocence, Jeffrey was found guilty of murdering Jessica and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, he showed no remorse for his actions. Willis's cousin, Kevin Blom, was also found guilty of helping to dispose of Jessica's body and received a sentence of 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Years after Jeffrey's conviction, new information came to light that implicated him in an older, unsolved case. On October 17, 1996, the body of Angela Thorberg was found in Fruitport, Michigan, with her killer never identified. After further investigation, Ed Blom, a 1988 high school graduate and Kevin Blom's father, was linked to the murder of Angela Thorberg in 1996. However, later evidence suggested that it was Jeffrey who became a suspect in Angela Thorberg's death. It has been 10 years since Jessica went missing, but her body has still not been found. After her disappearance, a court battle took place over the custody of Jessica and Dakota's son, Zon. Jessica's husband, Dakota, sought custody, but ultimately lost the case to Jessica's family. Zon currently lives with his grandparents and relatives on his father's side.